Hi, welcome to Savvy Ladies Wednesday Wisdom. My name is Lisa Ernst, and I'm the Executive Director of Savvy Ladies. Today, we welcome Cindy Sterling, founder and principal of Sterling Financial Planning, which she established to provide personalized financial advice. As a chartered financial consultant, Cindy helps clients systematically organize their finances, plan for their goals, and meet their needs. Cindy, we are so happy to have you with us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I know it's a very, very busy time of year, what with parties and buying gifts and seeing family and friends. So I want to honor your time and really do kind of a brief, light, LITE overview of some financial resolutions that you might want to consider for 2015. Financial resolutions, or I should say resolutions in general, New Year's resolutions in general, I always find is a time to sort of reflect upon what the year has been, what I've done well and what I haven't done so well, and then try to improve upon those things in 2015. So lots of times for me, it's like I'm going to eat less, particularly in December, given all the parties, or I'm going to eat better, or exercise more, or watch less TV, or see more friends. And it's all about me kind of tweaking my behavior so that I'm doing things that bring more joy or more benefit to me. That's true with financial resolutions as well. And so I want to talk about ways that we all can tweak our behaviors so that we may be in a stronger position financially. And if nothing else, so that we can do it in such a way to alleviate some of the stress that money often causes in our lives. So let's start off. Let's start talking about some of the financial resolutions that you may have. And I'd like to start off before we get to resolutions, and I have 5 suggested resolutions that you might want to consider. Before we start talking about that, I want to talk a little bit about what we can do with financial resolutions. The area of financial planning is just fraught with a lot of different variables. And that's true for all of us, whether we have really complex financial lives or more simple lives. The financial world is a complex organization. And so when coming up with financial resolutions, one of the things I really recommend is that we focus on, with those resolutions, on things that we can control. There's a lot in the world that we cannot control, particularly in financial planning. But if we can focus on the behaviors that we can control, then we're going to be in a lot better shape. And it's easier for us to judge and sort of benchmark how we're doing. Things that we can't control in our lives, in our financial lives, are things like the stock market. Stock market, I don't know about you, I don't have a lot of control over it. So the stock market can go up and the stock market can go down. And we felt a little bit of both of that in the month of December. So that's something I really can't control, but I can control how much money I put into my 401k. And I can control how much money I spend and how much debt I'm in. So those are things that I can control. Other things I can't control is I can't control tax laws. I don't know if I'm going to be taxed more highly in the future or if I'm going to get a tax break. So when thinking about your financial resolutions, I'd really focus on those things that you can actively do, that you can actively control. Now, before we get into what those resolutions are, I want to talk about very briefly what some of the tools are that we can use for those resolutions. And these are these are tools that you all know about, that our mothers told us, or our fathers told us about, or Susie Orman certainly told us about. Tools that we can use to secure our goals and make our lives a little bit less fraught with anxiety and more abundant with tranquility and, dare I say, serenity. So the tools we can use in financial planning to get to those goals are very simple. Things like spending less than you earn. So then we have actually 2 tools here. Spending less than you earn. This is very classic, right? Whatever you bring home in your paycheck after taxes and maybe other deductions, that's what we want to live on. When we spend more than that, that's when we get into bad debt, or the second point. And if we can stay out of bad debt, all the better. And what I mean by bad debt is that it doesn't bring a significant return to our lives. And I would categorize credit cards as bad debt. And any of you who have ever had excessive credit card debt, and I must confess, there was a point in my life where I had far more credit card debt than I would have liked, knows that it feels like an albatross around your neck. So trying to get out of that or trying to stay out of that is important. I'd say good debt would be things like a student loan. That is good because that debt that I take out for a student loan, is going to the benefit, or the return I'm going to get from that is a better education and potentially a better job, and maybe even an ability to enjoy different things in life. I'd say good debt would be a mortgage. There, the hope is that my house or apartment will actually grow or appreciate over time. Bad debt is when I buy a new television and I have to go into debt for it. That television will bring me, some return, but it's not going to enhance my life, and it's going to put another negative number on my spreadsheet, if you will. It's going to be something that I have to pay off. The next thing I'd say that we want to do is to pay ourselves first. And by that, I mean we just want to save. So when lining up those expenses, when looking at your credit card, not your credit card, your checkbook, when you get your paycheck, we're often paying our mortgage, we pay our rent, maybe we pay utilities. Pay yourself. Put some money aside for yourself. This is just locking in a behavior pattern where you automatically save right off the top. And once you save, then taking some of that money and using it to advance your investments. Let me just go back. So those are, forgive me, let me just go through this. So those are some of the tools that I'm certain are nothing new that you've heard about before. And that is what we can use when we go to advance our financial resolutions. So let's talk about 5 suggested resolutions I have for you. And one of the things I think is most important is really establishing what it is you want to accomplish this year. In my work as a financial planner, I'm a big believer in blending your financial goals with that of your life goals. And I often ask people to tell me what is most important to them. What are the priorities that they have in their life? And then my feeling is that we set up the money to help you get there. So this is very important. Kind of the apex of the question is, what do you want to accomplish this year? What is that in terms of your financial life? Does that mean that you want to reduce your debt? Does it mean that you want to add more money to a 401k? Hey, it could even mean that you want to take a vacation this spring. That's certainly one of my goals, a Caribbean vacation. So what is it? What is most important for you to do this year? And what I challenge you to do is to write it down. We're seeing increasingly when people write down their goals, they're infinitely more likely to actually achieve their goals than if we just kind of leave it in our head. So I'd encourage you to write it down and put it in a place that's visible where you can frequently see it. After you write down your goal or goals, the second thing I think that would be helpful for you to do is to quantify what it's going to take to achieve that goal. So what is that number? If I'm trying to pay off my debt and I have $3,000 on my Amex card, that's quantifiable. I know over the next year, I'm going to try to pay down that $3,000 of Amex debt. If my goal is to save for a wedding, then I'm going to have to put aside a certain amount of money to achieve that goal. And I'm going to have to know how much that wedding's going to cost. And then back to my Caribbean vacation, which is truly something that I'm considering, I need to figure out how much money that vacation is going to cost. Well, I've got to quantify it. How much will the airfare be? How much will the hotel be? How much will my nights out for fun be? What will that total cost be? And then once I have a quantifiable goal, I know what I've got to strive to achieve. Now, here's the thing about costs and goals, if I may. One of the things that we often have in our lives is what feels like, I think, two mutually exclusive goals. And that is we have financial resources, and that's resources that we'll use for our various goals. And then we also have lifestyle goals. So I may have champagne tastes in my lifestyle goals, but my financial resources are not that abundant to match that. So when coming up with these goals, really what we want to do is we want to try to blend these two so that we can live within our means. So that means going back to my vacation in the Caribbean, I may have champagne tastes and I may want to go to five-star hotels and eat exotic meals. But if my resources are limited to that goal, I've got to modify some of that goal so I can do it. So that may mean that maybe I don't spend quite as much money on a hotel, or maybe I stay fewer days, or some such thing as that. But making certain that we blend the two goals, financial and lifestyle goals, together so that one doesn't push against the other, because there's nothing worse than spending too much on a lifestyle goal and then having to try to chase it down and pay it down over time. Okay, so let's talk about the next step. We know what our goal is. We know what we want to accomplish this year. We've written it down. We've got some number attached to it as to how much it's going to cost. Now we got to talk about where we are now. In order to get to the goals of where we are, to get to our goals, we need to know where we're starting from. So let's talk a little bit about what that means. And one of the exercises that I think is really important to do at the beginning of the year, and I actually do this for myself as well as encourage my clients to do it, is determining at year end or at the beginning of the year what you own and what you owe. So, what do I mean by that? I mean coming up with a list of things that really delineate what you have in your life that you own, assets that you own, and then delineate what you owe, what loans are. So, this is really just basically a balance sheet for those of you who know that language or that concept. But in terms of what you own, it's breaking things up in terms of various accounts. So, for instance, I have checking and savings accounts. I have a brokerage account, which is where I have mutual funds outside of our retirement plan. I have retirement plans, and I may own a house or an apartment. There may be other things that you own too. You could have artwork, jewelry, musical instruments, all, second homes, whatever that may be, but listing all those things that you own. Secondly, listing what you owe. And what you owe, it's basically loans, mortgage, student loans, car loans, credit card debt. Those are the different types of loans that you may have. And again, the next step would be to quantify that. So let's say I have in my checking and savings account $10,000. I have a mutual fund in a brokerage account worth about $10,000. My 401k is $300,000. I own a house that I bought for $300,000. So my total assets are $620,000. What I owe is a mortgage. I owe a mortgage on that house for about $200,000. And I have a student loan of about $20,000. So my debt, or what I owe, is $220,000. So my overall net worth is $400,000. That's what I own minus what I owe. Again, it's sort of a net worth statement. Now, the reason I think this is important is that it's important for us to write down what we actually have right now. And then in 6 months' time, I encourage you to do the very same exercises with all your accounts. And the goal here is that what you own, all those assets that you own, the goal is hopefully over time that will increase in value. That's what we want to have go up. And that may go up due to our own savings. And truthfully, it may go up because the stock market goes up or the housing market goes up. And it can also go down, even if we put money into it. but it provides us with a benchmark. So we want what we own to go up over time, and we want what we owe to go down over time. And so that provides us a benchmark of seeing where we are. This can be very interesting to look at this over time. So I've been keeping track of this for a number of years, and it's very interesting, even in the years that I feel have been bleak. It hasn't been as good as I'd hoped. Oftentimes, looking at this own and owe balance sheet actually makes me realize that I've moved along further than I thought I had. So writing down what you own and you owe is a starting place for you to kind of set up your own benchmark as to how you're moving along with your own finances. Okay, second, so let's go to the third point. So you set up a goal, you determine where you are now by the own and owe balance sheet. And the next way to get to some of these goals is to develop a spending plan. Now, in all honesty, spending plans or changing our spending, I think, are one of the most challenging things we can do in financial planning. It's much easier to rebalance your investments. That doesn't require a huge behavioral change, but changing our spending does. And so I think it's a very, very powerful tool in financial planning, and one that often kind of gets derailed, or we derail ourselves with. But I think it's important for us to understand where our money is going. And so, one of the things I encourage you to do before developing a spending plan is determine where you are currently spending your money. I do this with all clients that come to see me. I ask them to complete a cash flow sheet where we really just we quantify and identify where money is being spent. I do this for myself every year as well. I do this on Quicken, and it's kind of illuminating to see where your money goes. It is often eye-opening, and the goal of this is to make us more conscious of how we're spending our money and what the total amount is that we're spending. Because once we know that, we can then develop a spending plan that based upon our actual behavior. So it may be I will tell you, and when I do my spending plans or when I look at how I'm currently spending my money, I'm always surprised at one, how much goes for restaurants, and secondly, how I'm surprised at kind of unusual events that happen during the year that I hadn't anticipated, such as something that had to be done on my house, something that needed to be repaired that cost thousands of dollars that I hadn't really thought about, but that happened. So lots of times when developing spending plans, we have our consistent spending, but it's the unusual expenses that often kind of surprise us. But by developing a spending plan, we can go pursue our goal. Because remember, one of the things that you're going to want to do if you have a goal and you have to save some money for it is you can build it in to the spending plan. And then what becomes really important moving forward is to monitor your spending plan. So it's all well and good if I look to see how I'm spending my money and know I've got to rectify things, and then I develop a spending plan. But it's not as helpful to me if I'm not monitoring how I'm doing. Am I staying within that spending plan? And that's not to be punitive. It's just to be illuminating. So to monitor how I'm spending my money, how we're spending our money, enables us to see, oh, this is what's happening. Perhaps I can make some changes here. It just keeps us more conscious about our money. And I think that helps immensely going down the pike. Now, once you got a spending plan, one of the things that you can do within the spending plan, of course, is to increase your savings. If you've got a goal, such as I do for that Caribbean vacation, in my spending plan, I'm going to have to build something where I can increase some savings for that goal. And so this is a goal we all have, right? We all know we need to pay ourselves first and we need to build up our savings. And one of the things I encourage you to do, if possible, is to think about ways you can increase your savings over the year. One of the easy peasy ways of doing that is if you get a raise, to allot a certain amount of that raise to your savings, or if you get a bonus, to allot a certain amount of your bonus to savings. And what are some of the buckets that I encourage people to save for? Well, let's talk about the big ones. Some of the most important buckets to save for is I talk with clients about an emergency fund. This is something that I think is so critical, and it helps alleviate so much stress if you know you have money set off to the side should the unexpected happen. So, some of the unexpected things that we often see are the loss of a job. If we lose our jobs, then it would be great to have some money in an emergency fund to support us during the time that we're looking for a new job. Emergency funds can cover things like medical expenses beyond what our health insurance may be covering. It can cover kind of those repairs that I needed to have done to my apartment that were sort of surprises. It can cover, a variety of things that we had not planned for. So emergency funds are usually, we quantify those often based on how much we spend per month. So often you'll probably hear Susie Orman or other financial folks talking about having 3 to 6 months or 3 to 8 months worth of expenses in an emergency fund. This is one of the big buckets I really encourage people to save for, particularly if you don't have one now. It's something that's really crucial. And I'd say the second bucket that, of course, is most common for folks is retirement. And we all know whether retirement is 5 years away or whether retirement is 35 years away, this is something where we have to put some money off to the side. And again, when we talk about increasing how much money you put into retirement, this is where I think it becomes, if you get that raise, just carving off part of whatever that raise is and dumping it into the retirement plan, the 401k, the 403b, whatever that retirement plan may be. That's one of the ways to increase it over time. And then finally, of course, the other bucket is your goal. And there may be others other than just your goal. You may have college savings that you're saving for. You may have a down payment for a house that you're saving for. Truthfully, we often have several different buckets of savings for different purposes. And so it's allotting the money to the various buckets so that you can pursue those goals. And I think it's often nice to have them broken up into buckets because then you know you've got a certain amount of money set aside for that goal. So my goal, that Caribbean vacation, in addition to making certain I have adequate money in my emergency fund and contributing to my retirement plan, I could put money aside in a separate goal for that Caribbean vacation. So now what some people I find are very, very good at saving money, those unique folks, and I just treasure them. It has not always been easy for me, and I appreciate when folks are able to do this really well. But there are some after we save that money where this transition doesn't occur. And that is once we have that money saved, we need to invest it and we need to monitor those investments. So I find that some folks are very, very good at savings, but making that transition to the investing becomes more challenging. And then to monitor those investments going forward. So a two-step process. Now, investments have become quite the conversation piece, particularly this month. We've seen the market go way up, and then in the months of December, in the last couple of weeks, actually, it's just been kind of a volatile situation where the market has gone down a bit. That said, there's certain parts of our savings buckets that we had previously in the previous slide. Some of those buckets are going to go into just savings accounts, and some are going to go into the stock market. I would argue that that emergency fund We want to just park that baby in a savings account, a high interest earning savings account, so it doesn't go down in value and it's always there in case of an emergency. But if I have a goal that is several years off, 5 or more years off, retirement, for instance, I need to invest that money. And that is where we throw that money into the stock market. Now, though we've gone through a really up and down period over the last couple weeks, we have seen a stock market that has gone up, particularly over the last 2 years. And so, one of the things I encourage you to do as a resolution is to look at your investments. Check what your asset allocation is. And what I mean by this is how much do you have in stocks and how much do you have in cash and bonds? What happens over time when we see the market go up, like it has really over the last 2 years, is that often if we were in stocks, the stocks grow as a percentage of the overall value. And usually what we want to do is that when it gets too high, we want to rebalance the allocation back to what we had initially planned, or what our goal asset allocation was. And sometimes when we don't monitor this, the allocation gets really out of whack. So what we had the best of intentions when we started, but the market took off. And this is the time we really need to go in and look as to how much do we have in stocks and how much do we have in bonds, and do we need to rebalance the allocation? Now, it could be that you really don't know what your asset allocation needs to be, and that's okay. There's a way you can solve for this as well. And that is, if you don't know what your asset allocation needs to be, then what I recommend that you do is, if you have a custodian, and most likely you will have this if you have a 401k or a 403b, and the custodians are the ones who run your investments. So that could be Fidelity, Vanguard, TIAA, CRAF. They will often offer a risk test for you to take. The risk test is designed to kind of get a sense of how risk oriented you are, how long it will be until you need the money, and particularly if it's a retirement plan, how old you are. And using those variables and from the responses that you give to the risk test, it will often come up with a suggested asset allocation. So I would look at what that suggested asset allocation is, and then compare it to what you currently have in your investments and see if you need to rebalance that fund. Again, the market has been up, and this is a time to really look at this and see if you need to tweak it going forward. So all told, I'd say as we enter 2015, doing the tried and true things that we've done in the past, that perhaps our money, and certainly Susie Orman have talked to us about, are going to be the things that are going to bring the most benefit to us. So again, number one, I would set a goal for yourself. What do you want to accomplish, and quantify what that is. Number two, determine where you are now. Do your own and owe balance sheet. Figure out how much money you're spending now, and develop a spending plan that's going to enable you to save money as well as meet your expenses. And of course, increase your savings if you can, but diligently save going forward as best you can for your various goals, using different buckets for all those different goals that you may have. And then monitor the investments of those savings. If you do all those things, you're going to be putting yourself in a much better situation for 2016. Are there any questions?
Thanks so much, Cindy. We have one that came over email. So let me just read it. It's kind of lengthy, but let me read it to you. I understand that I need to have 6 to 8 months of living expenses, and I have that in my savings. I also have about $10,000 of debt, but I only pay the minimum on my credit cards because I get nervous watching my savings account go down. Should I prioritize and get rid of the debt, or continue to save for my emergencies?
That's a really good question, and I'm certain a lot of us have been in a similar situation. First of all, bravo to you for having 6 to 8 months worth of expenses in your emergency fund. You've got yourself set up very well. My tendency would be if you have $10,000 of debt and you have that much in your emergency fund, my temptation would be to pay off the debt. That will probably still leave you with a significant amount of money in your emergency fund. And certainly if it leaves you with in excess of 6 months worth of expenses, you're in very good shape. The debt, my guess is going to be credit card debt, and that it's a very high interest rate on that. I mean, from 9, and that would be very low in percentages, up to 20%. So my inclination would be to see if you can pay down that debt and then build up your emergency fund even more.
Great, thanks. We don't have any other questions, but I just want to ask you, Cindy, when you work with a client and you put a spending plan together, um, what kind of pushback do you experience when they can't keep to the plan?
Well, I think we've all set up spending plans where we don't meticulously keep to the plan. I certainly have. I don't know about you, Lisa.
No, I have, yeah. That's the reason I'm asking.
A spending plan is not ironclad, and it's not, in my eyes, a pejorative if we don't hit it on the mark. It's a benchmark for us to try to go to or get to. That said, so no one's hands are slapped if we don't get there. But that said, I break up spending plans into three categories. One are fixed expenses, and those are expenses we can't change. So that for me is going to be my mortgage. I can't change my utility bills other than not having heat or some such thing as that. So fixed expenses or insurance, those are locked in. The second set is, I call them fixed but variable expenses and then discretionary expenses. Fixed but variable expenses are things that we have to pay for, but we can often vary the expenses. So, classic for that would be grocery shopping. I can probably reduce my grocery bills. I probably don't have to go to Whole Foods each time. I mean, I can play with that a little bit. Um, Discretionary expenses would be something like going out, dining out. And so it's playing with the latter two and trying to find a comfortable compromise between the two. And I tell every client, and I tell myself every time I look at this for myself, that it takes a while to get to in the groove of the spending plan. So don't beat yourself up if you don't do it in the first month. In fact, if you do it in the first month, my hat's off to you. For most of us, it requires time and tweaking and a lot of patience with ourselves.
Thanks, Cindy. I have another question on the chat. What would be more important, putting money toward your retirement account or taking steps to improve your home as an asset?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, they're both important. Um, and I have to say, I would probably try to divide it up between the two. There are certain improvements that we can make to our home that really can affect the value of the house. And there are certain improvements that, we don't necessarily will get the full amount back from. So if it's something that's really going to highly affect the value of the house, then that's worthy of putting money into. But the same token, retirement is extremely important, and we're seeing increasingly that many generations are not saving adequately for it. So I think I'd be tempted to sort of divide it between the two.
Great, thanks. And one other question that came in over email. Do you have an opinion about long-term care insurance?
Well, yes, I do. Um, Long term care insurance is is a very complex question. And just as a point of clarification, what this is insurance that helps with the activities of daily living. This is often affects people when we're older. That helps pay for people to come into our homes to help us with activities of daily living. And those are things like feeding ourselves, dressing ourselves, bathing ourselves, things such as that. Um, it's great if we can get this. It is also extremely expensive. And so, though I like long term care insurance, I think whether one gets it, whether a client of mine gets it, is really going to be dependent on their individual situation.
Hmm.
So, there are lots of things I like that I can't necessarily afford.
Right, right,
Um, so it's sort of it's deciding on the trade offs.
right. Okay. Well, thanks, Cindy. We're about out of time, but I really want to, I thank you. I really appreciate your time today. It was a wonderful presentation. And I want to thank everybody for the great questions that they asked and wish everybody a happy holiday.
Yes, happy holidays, everyone.
Okay, bye, Cindy.
Bye bye.